Hey everybody, welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm Joe. And as always, I'm ready to dive into some seriously juicy info with you all today. It's like we're mixing up a knowledge cocktail here. Strong stuff, but oh, so smooth going down.
And I'm Sunny, your friendly neighborhood fact checker. I'll make sure we get all the ingredients right. Speaking of mixing things up, you know it's always a good blend? Travel whiskey and discovering awesome new things. You have to check out our friend Micky's YouTube channel, Mickytolife.
Yeah, Mickey's the best. He's always got something cool going on.
Today, we're really diving headfirst into a pretty major story developing in Taiwan.
That's right. We're talking about this large-scale recall movement.
Yeah, and it's mainly targeting Kuomintang legislators, the KMT. Get this, as of mid-March 2025, just a few weeks back, something like 34 out of 39 eligible KMT legislators were facing these recall efforts.
Wow, 34 out of 39. That's massive.
It really is. So if you're trying to keep up with significant events without, feeling totally overwhelmed, this is definitely one to try and get your head around.
Absolutely. The scale itself tells you something's going on. So our mission today really is to unpack this. Why is it happening?
What are the main criticisms against the KMT?
Exactly. And of course, how does it all tie into the bigger picture, the whole cross-strait relations dynamic?
Okay, so where do we start? Well, one of the first things that kind of popped up in the research was the specific date, 4/26.
Yes, 4/26. It was linked to a KMT rally, wasn't it?
It was. And this YouTube channel, Let Up, they actually went out and asked regular people in Taiwan what they thought about the KMT planning this rally on 4/26.
And what was the reaction?
Well, it sounds like it raised more than a few eyebrows. Apparently 4/26, or how you'd say it in Taiwanese, si lao. It has this slang meaning. It can apparently refer to mainland China, or, well, maybe less flatteringly, to being a bit foolish.
Ooh, right. So choosing that date might have seemed ironic, maybe? Or just clumsy.
That seems to be the feeling. Some people interviewed were like, do they even get what 4/26 means to us? It questions if the KMT really understands the current mood or nuances.
Yeah, especially that potential double meaning, mainland China or foolish. That's quite the combination for a political rally date.
And one person joked, if the KMT really thinks the current government is a dictatorship, why rally on 4/26? Why not just join the protests already happening against the DPP?
That's a fair point. It makes you wonder about the strategy or maybe the message they were trying to send. Was it really about the DPP or something else?
Exactly. It feels like there's more going on. Some interviewees suggested this 4/26 rally wasn't even about ideology, but maybe more about internal KMT conflicts spilling out.
Internal politics. Interesting.
Yeah, and they found it a bit rich, for the KMT to be crying persecution from the DPP when they've got their own issues, like those death endorsements, legal cases we've heard about.
Right, so it muddies the water a bit. It makes people question their motives and priorities.
And it also brings up this other point about trust. The video mentioned this suspicion
that the KMT might be paying people to show up.
Yeah, that their mobilization efforts might rely on paid participants, which, if true, looks very different from the recall movement itself.
Definitely. The recall organizers are presented more as, volunteers driven by belief, not cash. A real contrast in political energy.
Which takes us right to the core issue driving the recall movement, doesn't it? This widespread concern that KMT legislators are just too close to the CCP.
That's the heart of it, yeah. We saw another video from, VFun TV showing a pro-recall rally.
And the language there was pretty strong.
Very strong. Accusations of wu, which, as you said, means licking the CCP. Basically accusing them of betraying Taiwan.
It's a powerful charge, and it seems focused on specific people within the KMT.
Absolutely. Figures like Fu Kunchi are mentioned repeatedly. He and others are seen by many recall supporters as being, way too aligned with Beijing's agenda.
And you see that reflected in the movement slogans, too. Oppose unification, protect Taiwan.
Yeah, it's a clear, direct message.
And it's not just online noise. That rally on April 19th, Ketagelen Boulevard in Taipei.
Yeah, reports said around 55,000 people. That's substantial.
Definitely. Organized by people like Ba Jiang, the internet personality, and this anti-CCP Protect Taiwan Volunteers Alliance, it shows real grassroots mobilization.
And it seems to be uniting different groups under this common cause, pushing back against what they perceive as CCP influence.
Targeting legislators they think are weakening Taiwan's defenses.
And its social fabric, its unity, that's the core aim.
So let's dig into these criticisms of the KMT a bit more. It sounds like this isn't just a sudden thing.
No, not at all. The perception is that this goes back quite a way, particularly related to their stance on the 1992 consensus.
Right. The argument seems to be that the KMT has kind of abandoned its old anti-communist position.
That's the narrative, yeah. That they've shifted so much, they're now seen by many critics as basically acting like CCP proxies, whether they mean to or not.
That's a huge shift historically.
It is. And you see this reflected in some media. That Taipei Times piece mentioned Fu Kunchi possibly getting instructions from Beijing.
Wow. And it used that phrase, KMTTP 8th Root Army.
Yeah, referencing an old communist force. It's a very pointed analogy, suggesting their legislative actions are designed to disrupt Taiwan's constitutional order. A really serious accusation.
And it's not just high-level politics either, is it? There are local issues, too.
Definitely. We heard about criticisms that KMT politicians haven't done enough for local economies in their areas, leading to, ongoing poverty.
That kind of thing really hits home for people. It makes recall seem much more tangible.
Absolutely. And then you connect that local frustration to their actions in the legislature, passing laws seen as unconstitutional.
Like that legislative yuan oversight bill.
Exactly. That caused a big uproar over separation of powers. And then there are the budget cuts and freezes for 2025.
Right. The Ministry of Culture budget was mentioned specifically. Reduced and then frozen parts, too.
Yeah. The figures showed a planned increase that was less than inflation might suggest, from NT $25.9 billion in 2024 to NT $29.0 billion planned for 2025, but then with additional freezes on top.
Yeah.
Critics saw that as undermining Taiwan's cultural policy.
So it's a mix of big-picture ideology and very specific policy decisions driving this.
Precisely. But there's also a really personal angle to the anti-unification feeling.
Ah, you mean the speaker in that fun TV video? Their experiences in China?
Yes, exactly. It wasn't just abstract politics. It was about their actual lived experiences there.
What kind of things stood out?
Issues around trust, mainly. This feeling that, people talk big but deliver little. A lack of reliability.
Okay, I see.
And also observations about public behavior, noise, littering, even public urination, just a different standard, and a noticeable gap in living standards and what they call people's quality.
Right. And wasn't there an anecdote about some project, an ecological park?
That's right. A flawed plan, apparently, where concerns about quality were just waved away to cut costs. It painted a picture of a system prioritizing cost over quality or long-term thinking.
And the conclusion drawn was pretty stark.
Very stark. A warning that unification based on these experiences could mean a really miserable life for people in Taiwan.
And this personal story seems to connect to broader arguments we found elsewhere.
It does. The HE source echoes this. These personal warnings often highlight the big differences in political systems' freedoms.
Freedoms Taiwan has that mainland China doesn't under the CCP.
Exactly. Concerns about economic impacts, limits on free speech. These are major anxieties that fuel the anti-unification sentiment.
Which brings us to maybe a more awkward point that came up, this idea of perceived low-quality behavior.
Yes, that was discussed in the DG source. It listed specific things sometimes associated with some visitors or residents from the mainland, noise in public, littering.
And those less sanitary habits you mentioned earlier.
Right. But the source tried to offer some context, which is important.
Like what?
Things like cultural differences. Maybe collectivism not always translating to public space awareness. Different levels of, say, etiquette education.
Infrastructure issues, too. Lack of public toilets, maybe? Uneven enforcement?
Potentially, yeah. And even economic pressures. Maybe a focus on materialism or behavior as a form of venting frustrations.
But, and this seems crucial, the source warned against overgeneralizing.
Hugely important point. You can't paint everyone with the same brush. Similar issues exist in lots of places undergoing rapid change.
And China's population is just so vast, right? So individual incidents might seem more frequent statistically.
Exactly. Plus, the source mentioned ongoing efforts within China to improve public behavior. Changes are happening, especially with younger generations.
So it's a complex picture, not just a simple stereotype.
Definitely not. Nuance is key there.
Okay, so finally, let's tackle this hypothetical question that the source material explored. What if a developing country, like China, were to actually rule a developed place, like Taiwan?
Yeah, the story analysis really broke down why that's seen as, well, largely impractical, almost unreasonable.
What were the main challenges? Political ones first.
Big ones. Governance capacity. Could the PRC system effectively manage Taiwan's complex society and economy? Legitimacy. How would you gain consent from people used to democracy? Massive resistance seems likely.
And human rights concerns, obviously. Big differences there.
Huge. Things like the social credit system, surveillance, major points of friction. Then economically.
Could they maintain Taiwan's welfare state, its infrastructure?
That's the question. Resource gaps, capacity gaps. Plus, the economic structures are different. Taiwan's more knowledge-based, high-tech. And think about international reaction.
Sanctions. Economic isolation.
Very likely.
Yeah.
Which would harm both sides. And then socially, culturally.
Clashes over values, individual freedom versus the collective.
Absolutely. Potential for major social instability. The source points out there's really no historical precedent for this exact scenario.
Hong Kong is maybe the closest comparison.
And even there, with cultural and economic similarities, governance has been challenging, to say the least.
So the conclusion is it's just not a realistic scenario. Governance, culture, economics, the barriers are too high.
That was the assessment, yeah. That direct rule is pretty unfeasible. Cooperation or trying to expand influence seem like more plausible, though still complex, approaches from Beijing's perspective.
Okay, so let's wrap this up, bringing it all together from our deep dive.
Well, it seems clear this recall movement in Taiwan is really fueled by these deep worries about CCP influence.
And a real dissatisfaction with how the KMT is perceived, particularly its stance towards Beijing.
Definitely. And those personal stories, those experiences highlighting cultural and political differences, they really pack a punch in shaping public opinion.
Yeah, they add a very human dimension to it all.
And that hypothetical we just discussed, a developing nation ruling a developed one, it really highlights the massive practical and ideological challenges involved.
So for you listening, we hope this breakdown has helped you get a clearer picture of this really complex situation, focusing on the key arguments without getting too lost in the weeds.
Yeah, trying to make sense of it all. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought, something for you to maybe ponder.
Considering everything we've talked about, the political pressures, the cultural differences, the economic factors.
What are the most effective ways, really, for any society today to protect its own values, its own sovereignty in a world that's so interconnected, but also has these competing political systems pushing and pulling?
It's a tough question. How do you navigate national identity, political ideology, and these big geopolitical forces like the ones constantly at play across the Taiwan Strait? Something to think about.